Yo, what is going on, Omi homies and Omets? We are tuning into the live stream of Immutable X, of course. So welcome in everybody tuning in all over the world. We're just going to kind of passively stream this one. We got about 10 minutes, of course, until the stream starts, about 11 minutes or so. But you get the picture. So this is going to be interesting. I mean, literally, this could be anything. So there's really no telling. Throw in your guesses in live chat to let me know what you think it is. Is it going to be Microsoft partnership, a Blizzard partnership, Activision, or are we going to see something like a marketplace type of partnership like OpenSea and Amazon, or maybe multiple announcements? Because it does appear, if we go to their website, we can check that out. But they have like these box style like graphics. We can actually pull up just Twitter actually right here, and you can kind of see these drop boxes. It says expect the unexpected alongside the single biggest addition of utility for IMX. A legendary partnership is coming. So we know there's at least something there, and maybe something else. So again, it could be a couple announcements. Even Robbie, the founder of Immutable X, says tomorrow Immutable is unveiling one of 3 fundamental utility upgrades. And so yeah, let's go ahead and get back to the stream real quick as well. So
I was going to quickly.
all right, guys, I'll be back in just a little bit. We'll wait a little bit closer to the stream starting.
With building and scaling games on Web3, where players can truly own their assets. But I wanted to start with a bit of an origin story. Back in 2017, we saw the first ever NFT come out with CryptoPunks. And for us, this was exciting, because it was the first time outside of payments, Web3 could be used for any mainstream application. And so we did what any self-respecting software engineers would do, and we built a prototype. This was the first ever multiplayer game launched on a blockchain. Some of you may remember it. It was called Etherbots. It was essentially a rock, paper, scissors prototype that was completely on-chain with modular robot parts where everyone was an NFT. And although it was a proof of concept, it went viral, and it captured the hearts and minds of what was a very small Ethereum-based ecosystem back then, because it held a promise of potential. And that was that the $150 billion US spent by players every year on in-game items, not access to games, that they don't own, could never trade, and had limited rights to, could be changed. To actually give players the rights to own their assets, to sell them, and to build interoperable and creative universes where they could be financially empowered. There was just one problem. Playing a game on Etherbots would cost you, at its peak, over $1,000 US in gas fees. It would take you anywhere between a minute and 20 minutes in gas timing in order to confirm the block confirmations for randomness. And it was a user experience that could barely scale to 1,000 people, let alone the 3.1 billion gamers we have in the world today. So we had a problem. And our solution was then what any self-respecting software engineer should do, which was to build a platform that would make it easy for other game developers to build. And for us, taking a leaf out of the Steam playbook, where they built Counter-Strike Go and then leveraged that into a Steam platform today, we decided that we would build a game that showcased the potential of Web3 for everyone. We would take the most obvious use case, one that players already loved, which was Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic the Gathering cards, where billions of dollars of physical cards are traded every single year, and we'd create the first ever digital version, where you could properly own your cards. And so we launched Gods Unchained, which today is one of the largest Web3 games in the world, has hundreds of thousands of players, and did $15 million of revenue in its first year. And so we knew that we had started something with promise. But today I want to talk to you about the evolution of Immutable and what we've built today. Right now we have #1 market share in the world for Web3 gaming as measured by funding. Nearly $1 billion were invested into games last year alone by third-party VCs, not including our own ecosystem, on games building on Immutable. These games have yet to go live, and the job we have in front of us is how can we make the user experience for these as simple as possible and as easy as possible. We've onboarded last year, in January, there were 3 games building on our platform. Today, there are more than 150 and more than 15 marketplaces building on our global order book. Over half of all trades on our platform are filled on non-origin marketplaces. That means a player can sell something in-game and someone can buy it on a GameStop marketplace or Rarible or Token Trove or a major NFT aggregator. And a fifth of all funding for Web3 games came to Immutable ecosystem games last year. So our original vision of building this platform, we've been able to create over 5 years of hard work. And today is the next chapter in this journey, which I'm thrilled to share with you guys. So I want to dive first off into Immutable Games, or our portfolio/publishing studio. You're probably familiar with this already from such titles as Gods Unchained and Guild of Guardians. Gods Unchained has, at its peak, hundreds of thousands of monthly active players. It's one of the most popular Web3 games in the world. And what I'm proudest of is if you go to godsunchained.com, you won't see the word NFT once on the website. And that's from what we built in 2019. And that's because our vision has always been, how do we actually allow players to experience the benefit of true ownership? Not shield them the value of blockchain technology. That's for conference rooms like this, but it's not for taking this to the 3.1 billion gamers whose lives and economic prosperity we are trying to transform. We are expanding Immutable Game Studios massively with publishing, where we are jointly partnering closely with several games each year in order to provide a high level of user experience, custom Web3 economic design, community, and helping onboard some of the biggest game developers in the world onto building highly successful, robust Web3 economies. So let's jump to the first, Metalcore. It's a video, so hopefully this works. Metalcore is an open-world, mechanized combat game like you've never seen before. It's the winner of the Game 3 2022 awards for the best shooter game, and they're a free-to-play, futuristic multiplayer where you can onboard incredibly simply. Most importantly, this is developed by, essentially, gaming veterans who have had massively successful free-to-play games. For us, the most successful Web3 games will be people who know how to build an experience that feels identical to the most popular games today. The vision we're going toward is a world where you don't have to add the prefix Web3 to these games. They're simply games where you get digital property rights that gamers over time will come to expect. The audio is very soft, but it's exciting. Second up, we have the honor of working with Bitfire Game Studios, which is the team that brought you Ultimate Rivals in their reimagining of a futuristic sports arcade game. We're incredibly excited to announce Infinite Victory, which will feature major sports IPs that all of you will know. The goal will be to build one of the leading sports franchises in Web3 gaming studios, and working with Bitfire is an incredible privilege. So more to come here soon. We don't have an exciting teaser for this one yet. And finally, Bazooka Tango is working with Immutable to create Shardbound. And actually, as of this morning, pre-registrations are open. This is a turn-based tactics strategy game that combines board-based strategy with essentially the depth of a CCG. Obviously, we have a lot of expertise here, and we're really excited to bring the best of the economics and IP we've learned from Gods Unchained to what will be an incredible gaming experience. Again, the goal with this is to build a game which has completely mainstream user onboarding and where you can't even notice it's a Web3 game under the hood. That is Immutable Studios. Next, I'd love to touch on, thank you, Passport. The biggest problem in Web3 today is user onboarding. And the reason this matters so much is if you look at any game, games compete on one thing, which is... games compete on one thing, which is how much does it cost to acquire each player? You then have things like retention and monetization to measure it post that. But the biggest problem today is you sign up to a Web3 game and you have a few options. You can either go full self-custody, which we think is incredibly important. If you look at FTX, if you look at what's just happened with SVB and Signature Bank, and the huge losses that were imparted upon, ultimately, at the end of the day, users and depositors, not the big companies. And our vision is a world where you can have complete self-custody, complete security, but you never touch a seed word. You never touch a private key. And this is what Immutable Passport is. It uses brand new architecture to effectively have complete self-custodial onboarding, but you can sign up with an email or OAuth. And this is a brand new innovation of what previous custodial wallets have been able to achieve, because we don't have to spin up a unique wallet for every single game. This means you can use the same wallet and the same user funds across every single game you're building on. So we're bridging liquidity between games and between rollups to create the one-stop shop for players. This is the key final piece of architecture that's been missing to allow the billions of gamers today to onboard without even knowing this is Web3 under the hood. So we're incredibly excited for Immutable Passport. Finally, I'd love to touch on our roadmap. We've made some massive progresses. So the first thing we want to touch on is that Immutable Passport will be fully live in production next month. And so this will mean you'll be able to sign up to any Web3 game integrated with multiple wallet ecosystems, incredibly simply with only your email. At launch, we're going to be supporting third-party ecosystems like MetaMask through wallet linking, and you'll be able to sign on with a bunch of other vendors as well. Now, of course, Unity, you may have seen our announcement 1 month ago. We're extremely excited to be launching our SDK integration and our partnership with Unity. And what this will basically mean is that inside the client, you'll be able to have instant SDK access to minting or creating of economies with Immutable's SDK inside Unity itself. Unity powers over half of all game developers today, tens of millions of them, and this is the key next step in order to onboard hundreds of thousands of game developers onto Web3. Awesome. Finally, I would love to touch on one of the biggest announcements we have here today, which is ultimately, Immutable stands for Web3 gaming, and our goal is how do we onboard and make this the default for everyone who plays. But for too long, people have been able to having to decide between multiple competing architectures or solutions. And ultimately, this is wasting time, it's wasting energy, and it's wasting the resources that could be spent on building better games for players every single day. So without ado, I'd like to present what will be the company's biggest announcement today.
In the world of gaming, competition is fierce, but sometimes something unexpected happens. Something that changes the game forever. A legendary partnership is born. Gaming will never be the same again.
Awesome. So incredibly excited to announce the Immutable Polygon partnership. And actually, we'll be inviting some special guests, Kylie Riley and Ryan White, up to the stage to come discuss it with you guys.
Hello, everyone. Oh, is this good? Everyone can hear me? Yeah. Woo! Everyone having fun at GDC? Yeah. There we go, in rainy San Francisco. I'm Carly Riley. I'm the host of a podcast called Overpriced JPEGs. I also host a podcast called Immutable X, or called Between Two Layers with Immutable X. We have been thinking about changing the name with Robbie. And I'm so excited to be here with the two of you to talk about this really big news here in the blockchain gaming world. So let's start with just the basics. Tell us what this partnership is and how it came to be. Really, what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, for sure. I feel a little bit intimidated being on here with a professional podcaster and a professional pro streamer. So really what this partnership is to us is the leading Web3 gaming platform, which is Immutable today, partnering with the leading blockchain scaling protocol, which is Polygon, to create what will be the one-stop shop and a new home for Web3 gaming. I think for a very long time, gamers have been forced to choose between what solution will bring the best user experience versus the best scalability. And ultimately, the goal is just make incredible games where players are empowered with true self-custody and decentralization, and take this mainstream as quickly as possible. You know, there's been $15 billion invested into Web3 games over the last 2 years. It's the most invested in category in crypto, and it's one of the most invested in nascent tech categories in history. Our job should be making sure that these games can succeed brilliantly. They have impeccable onboarding. They have scale that can take them to the peak of a $100 million DAU game, which is what the biggest games in the world regularly touch on. And for us, working with a partner like Polygon on both product and go-to-market is the ideal way to bring this to life. I mean, last year, if you look at funding, more than $2 billion was nearly invested in Immutable and Polygon alone. So this really creates a unified solution where they can scale incredibly easy and focus on what they do best, which is building incredible quality games.
Yeah, for us, if you think about the focus for Polygon is that we want to be a protocol first and foremost for all developers. And so whether we're working with somebody like Starbucks or Nike, or we're working with a small project that's building, we really care making sure that we have this great protocol that can scale, that anybody can plug into, anybody can build on it. And if you look at what Immutable is, it's the best Web3 gaming platform. And so when I think about what can we do for Polygon to continue to improve a developer experience, having the best Web3 gaming platform on top of the protocol is going to be so positive for the game developer ecosystem and the gaming users as well. So for me, it's a very easy decision, and I think it's a great alignment of partnership and the stars for developers to just onboard seamlessly. And if you think about it, the hardest, when people are thinking about game development, it is such a hard process, and you just, at the end of the day, need to make a great game. And if you think about all of the capital that's already injected into the games business and the games industry, just trying to nail a game and make it fun is very challenging. And so we want to abstract away any other issues, right? Just like the way you think about leveraging, maybe AWS or cloud for your multiplayer infrastructure experience. Now you can think about a really easy, seamless way to plug in where you have marketplace and wallet and actually just build this marketplace for, users that actually own their assets and make it very seamless and not have to think about the crypto and kind of some of the like the jargon that comes with it. It should be a really easy experience for developers to plug in. It should be very easy for users as well. It hasn't been that case up until now, and we actually think now this offers, a great end-to-end experience.
You're starting to get at this by saying you just want the best experience, game-wise for developers. But how does this plug into both your long-term game strategies for your various platforms?
Yeah, look, my whole background has been in gaming. I'm very passionate from a gaming perspective. The reason I, left Google to go into this wild industry of Web3 was that as somebody that, sees that more and more folks are spending money on digital assets, as you see that is becoming more of a core part of game developers' business. I think over time what you'll see is gamers want more ownership and autonomy over these things. They're spending a lot of money per person, per player on this, and it's a very one-direction kind of relationship with the game developer and the user. And that's worked for a while, it's been great, but I also think you're gonna see an inflection point where there will be more focus and emphasis. If you buy something, you deserve to own that item, whether it's Nike shoes or a AK-47 cosmetic skin, right? So I think this is gonna be a big part of it, and really all blockchain really is just effectively a product feature for game developers to tap into. I think we've made too much over Web3, over NFTs, over so forth. It's a very simple concept. You just leverage it like you would leverage cloud infrastructure to kind of build out these ecosystems. For us, to kind of go back to the question, I think it's just a really big part of what we believe in which is giving rights back to users. I think the internet has long had this kind of conundrum where you have walled gardens and you have a disproportionate amount of power that's being driven by, large tech who have been able to kind of capitalize on the walled gardens in the internet. And I think over time, you have to give more of an emphasis for the users. So I just think what you're starting to see is a little bit more of blockchain kind of running parallel as a product feature of the internet. Not everything needs to be on it, but this will be a big part of it. And so, when we think about, users having more autonomy over ownership, whether again, it's their Starbucks rewards or it's something that they're doing from a Nike digital perspective, gaming is at the core part of it. And gaming is a very important part of, Polygon's mission. And we think this just is like kind of caps that off in a really great way.
Yeah.
How about you, Robbie?
Yeah, plus one to that. I think there's a few things, right? Which is, I think the part of the reason this is so complementary is that right from the very beginning, both Polygon and Immutable had a very similar vision with respect to where should people build. And that was, don't create an Ethereum killer, Don't create a competing L1. Use the thing that everyone already wants to use. Ecosystem first, community first, liquidity first, ultimately, which is how do you maximize volume for games? How do you create the best prices for players? And so I think that was a really native synergy here, which is like a very Ethereum-centric way of scaling the future. And I think the second thing is a complete commitment to the belief that the first mainstream breakout category for Web3 is going to be gaming. If you look at Web3 on any basis, we have roughly 30 million monthly active users. It's nothing. One breakout hit will triple Web3's user base overnight. And it will do so in a way where people aren't understanding or interacting with the technology directly, because that's ridiculous. It's like shilling people HTTPS or AWS between Google Cloud or Azure. What people really care about is the benefits they receive. And for me, the reason that this was such an obvious place to start is Counter-Strike Go. Do we have any CSGO players in here? Yeah, good show of hands. And I think if you remember, there was a third-party marketplace called Opskins back of the day. I think it was worth a few $100 million. There was hundreds of millions of dollars trading on this every year. And Steam made one change, which was they basically shut down trading to a maximum of once per week. And I always bring up this example anytime people say, well, why can't you just use a database? And it's because people try database systems all the time, and those systems regularly screw over their players. Hundreds of millions of player hours and millions of dollars spent by users went to zero. Opskins, a $300 million company, went bankrupt, belly up, because of the changes that Valve or Steam implemented on this day. And so for us, the most important thing is creating a system that we can't control, one where players can actually own, at the end of the day, their assets. Even if it's not for profit, even if it's not for speculation, what we believe in is trading things for a buck that you might want to trade because, hey, this is how you used to trade things as kids for Pokemon or Magic cards. So I think bringing that utility and that use case to Web3 is extremely exciting.
Is there a tokenomic tie-in for this at all, Robbie, when you think about Immutable and what you guys are doing here?
Yeah, there absolutely is. So I think one of the really exciting things for us is, for a very long time, and we'll obviously be continuing our StarkX application, but it's an app-specific roll-up, so it doesn't have smart contracts. And the limitation of that is we've had very limited tokenomics, which has been, it has a lot of utility, but it's very limited in one particular dimension. Because we're now building on this open Immutable ZK EVM with Polygon's tech, we can now have a huge, essentially, overhaul of IMX utility. And the first thing in what we're announcing today, and obviously it's more for the Web3 crowd than the gaming crowd if you're in this room, is we'll basically be allowed to use IMX as the native gas currency of Immutable ZK EVM for the first time ever. So this is essentially like adding on, the core utility of a Solana or an Aptos, which means it'll be used to regulate transactions and sequence transactions on the network. And of course, Matic will be used as our staking token on this, plus all our custom ZK EVMs.
We're here at GDC. There may be some blockchain skeptics, maybe in this room, but certainly probably at this conference.
There's none here at GDC. What do you mean?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
Why does blockchain matter for games and game studios?
Yeah, I think Robbie actually touched on it pretty well. At the end of the day, when you think about you're purchasing anything, right? Say you're purchasing, again, like a pair of shoes from Nike. It's really not Nike's business at that point, what you do with those shoes, what you decide to do with them, how you think about it, right? And so the problem with centralized databases as well is they still have a lot of control over it. And so in that same kind of setup, Nike can be like, well, you can have those shoes, but I'll tell you what you can and can't do with them. Yeah, I'll let everyone know that you own them, but I'm really gonna limit what you can do with them. And so I think it's really important in general that you have like a third-party infrastructure where once the purchase is made, that it kind of can sit there where universally everybody's on that. And so that's what I kind of think of from a blockchain perspective, why it's really good. It's like an intermediary between the person selling the digital asset and the person that's owning it, and that way that it really can be genuinely owned by that individual. And so that's really important because, for me, growing up, I was a huge Counter-Strike player my whole life, even playing Valorant all the time now. And look, like somebody just spent $160,000 on a Counter-Strike skin last week, right? You have, Valve or Steam can do whatever they want with that, right? You can't do anything with it. You can resell it into the marketplace, but then that money stays inside of the walled garden of Steam. And that's cool, right? That was pretty innovative for them to do. We just got to move past that now, right? Like, what is the next iteration of that? How do you evolve past that? And not everything is made for, I think there's a lot of hyperbole in the space. There are so many great games that never need to touch blockchain, right? And I think oftentimes we speak it's going to do all this for everything. It's not. You look at at games like God of War and Last of Us, that shit should never be on chain, right? It makes no sense. It doesn't need to be, right? But I think when you have a lot of this, this movement in these like games as a service or platforms as a service where the model is on free to play and is heavily relying on people buying digital items and cosmetics and skins, you can't just continue to have this one relationship direction where it's like, I'm gonna let you buy this and I'm gonna provide a license to it. And so I think games are starting to think about different ways to leverage players and how to give value back to players. Dead Drop is a great game from Midnight Society where they're really showcasing how do you actually have this open game that anybody can play. They don't need to actually be on, aspects of on-chain and can still have fun with it. But then they have like a founder pass that's really important. And like from that founder pass, because these early adopters were involved, I spent like $50 on it. But this Founder Pass has a bunch of different cool stuff. It like lets you vote and be a part of the game development. It lets you get early access to some of the builds that they have. Super cool merch, exclusive events. It's really fun. It's a cool pass. Now that pass is selling for like $1,000. So as a player, you can be like, screw that. I bought this pass because I'm in it for this game. I'm in it for the long run. I don't want to sell it. But the fact of the matter is like, they invested their time, money, and energy early in this game, right? As part of the development cycle, they as a community and players, right? And now they get to kind of participate in growing it. And it's not about the money at all. It has nothing to do about the money. It's that there is more like equitable distribution of power between the game developer and the community. And I think if you really want these like symbiotic relationships from a games as a service or platform as a service, you need to have more like equitable rights between the developers and the users. So there's a lot of hyperbole in this space. There obviously, if you look at V1 iteration of blockchain games, they were horrendous, financialization first games. It's not the direction that I see the games industry going. When you think about $2 billion, that literally $2 billion of capital was injected into game studios that are built on Immutable and Polygon now, like together, right? Those games haven't even come out. Yeah, in 2022 alone, right? Those games haven't come out yet. And so a lot of what people assess this space on are shit games that kind of came out early that were rushed to market. But those who are seeing, okay, there's these underlying mechanics in which you can kind of have more distribution of power between the gamer and the developer, they see that, and now they're actually starting to think about really smart, unique ways to build that in. And this is not gonna stop. Like, announcements are gonna keep happening. Large game Square Enix is building on Polygon now. More game publishers are gonna be announcing that they're building on chain. It's obviously really starting in the East, will continue to come to the West. And so this is happening. It's not gonna stop. It's kind of, that ship has sailed. And so like now, how do we actually have really great games that tap into it? So I'm very excited about directionally where it's going.
I want to double down on one thing Ryan said there, which is incentive alignment. Ultimately, the most important thing is not true ownership. It's what incentives does that ownership create? Because at the end of the day, anyone can implement NFTs in their game and then deprecate that game. So what? They don't have to maintain the value. What it does change is the fundamental business models that will be successful in this universe. And those business models are much more pro-player. There's a fundamental incentive alignment between the people building these economies and the people playing these economies. And look at the incentives of the gaming industry today. Warzone 2 made everyone's assets in Warzone 1 valueless so that they could milk another $1 billion. We have Counter-Strike Go deprecating people's assets, even though people want to spend $160,000 on it. People are so desperate for governance and protection over what is an incredibly meaningful part of their lives that literally, EVE Online has a delegation of 10 to 15 players every year who fly out twice a year to the headquarters to review changes to the economy and survey code being updated in that game. That is the protection that we're giving players. And the best example I can give of this is, if anyone played Magic the Gathering with physical cards back in the day, there's, I'm sure, a ton here, myself included, although Hearthstone was more my game because I'm a normie. But Magic the Gathering trades tens of billions of dollars of assets every single decade. They have an estimated secondary market cap of $20 billion US. And if Magic the Gathering didn't have to monetize by issuing new primary assets every year, they would no longer have to devalue the old assets by making new and more powerful sets. They could simply improve the experience of the game through whatever means necessary and improve economic volume over time while taking clips on secondary trades. And that incentive alignment is so much better for players because it preserves historic value and creates this ongoing economy and shared unified strategy. You know, last year in the middle of the bear run, Illuvium sold $72 million of land on Immutable, and all of that revenue went back to the players and owners of Illuvium the game.
There is not a single other industry in the world, save the fewer than 100 cooperative companies that are really mainstream today, where you can say that of. And this is the vision we're pushing towards. The world is becoming increasingly digital. Gaming is now bigger than music, movies, and TV combined. We're either going to end up in a world where this is owned by Meta and you're charged 52% on it, or Apple and it's 30%, or we're going to end up in a world where it's decentralized. People themselves can have rights and ownership to it, and this incredibly core part of people's identities, they can actually have property guarantees over.
How does this partnership in particular help the game studios and gamers?
I think with gamers we've outlined, but with game studios, I think I go back to it's not been easy to put together all the different things needed to actually ship a game that has an aspect or all of it on chain. I think it's, it requires an additional technical prowess for these teams. A lot of these teams want to be nimble. They want to just have people that make great games inside of them. They're well capitalized, but now they're having to spend time thinking about tokenomics and thinking about how they think about this stack end to end. It's a pain in the ass. They really shouldn't have to be spending that level of time and detail. So when I think about Immutable, on top of Polygon, you now have a very clean end-to-end stack that you just don't have to worry about. It's very easy to plug into it. It's very easy to just say, okay, this is going to be how we develop this aspect of it, and it really doesn't then take capital and resources outside of the studio to go build that. And that really is important. So I think that will be the biggest shift for game developers. I think because of that, then it'll create this huge inflection point of better games within the category.
Again, I wanted to double down, and I think one thing that the industry gets wrong today is that they view, improving proprietary smart contract languaging as improving developer experience. It's not. It's like making the gates of hell slightly cooler to cross. This stuff is incredibly impossible to use. The security architecture alone introduces brand new vulnerabilities which people have never seen in the Web 2 analogy. What will be the reality is that smart contract development will be there for infrastructure developers, the 5% of developers building services and tools that everyone else wants to use. The vast majority of people, particularly in an industry like gaming, just want to build with APIs. They just want to use a Stripe-like interface. Hey, create an economy that's simple for me to use. And actually, if you look at any successful shift in the distribution of gaming before, the mobile distribution, the shift to social, the shift to free-to-play, all of these were catalyzed by two things. The first was someone rigorously working through an incredibly difficult technical landscape to create the first breakout hit. Let's take social, the example is Zynga and Farmville. But very quickly after that, they create platformized tools which are incredibly easy to use, but more importantly, they create a playbook that can be copied over and over and used as the default playbook for how you can now use that. I think Farmville was Mafia Wars, also by Zynga, was cloned 15 times. And they had one, hairbrush game for girls aged 6 to 10. It literally had the exact same logic with Mafia Wars under the hood. They were just relabeling you're now a level 5 hitman with you're a level 5 Barbie stylist. And these things went were incredibly successful. And we need that inflection moment for Web3, where it's hey, you want to build a successful game that empowers your players, here's your standardized economy playbook. And that's really how we're going to go mainstream.
We're starting to get at some of this, but what are the key objections you hear from developers when it comes to building on the blockchain?
Yeah, so I think there's a few. I think the first is user experience, which I just touched on. People don't want to mess around with smart contracts. They want to use APIs. I think the thing we're really excited about is with smart contract open dev now, and especially EVM compatibility, which Polygon natively supports rather than sort of the pseudo compatibility a few other people are trying to do, is it's very easy to drag and drop the existing work on Ethereum, which makes it a lot easier for people to build. So we're going to be able to support things like swaps in game. We're going to be able to support things like DeFi. It's my conviction that in 5 years' time, Goldman Sachs will have a trading desk trading Fortnite skins. And you'll be able to go long, John Wick skins of 2019 and short, I don't know, the latest ridiculous dance that they're supporting. And this is a reality. We have futures on pork knuckles. Anything with a sufficient primary liquidity market gets these markets. And this is excellent. It creates really interesting environments. It creates support for people to create more interesting games. We only got the McChicken nugget because Ray Dalio managed to create a futures market on core ingredients, which gave McDonald's sufficient stability to create that. Now, think about applying those same principles to what people can do with gaming. And suddenly you can support a whole long tail of games and ecosystems that were never before economically viable. But back to the question, which is what do game developers not like about blockchain? blockchain. I think also the word NFT and the word blockchain, it has a terrible reputation. And I think that our goal is really just give them the value. You know, people often ask me, how do you take Web3 mainstream? And I know Ryan completely supports this answer. And the answer is, frankly, not sitting here and telling you why blockchain is beneficial to gamers. It's gamers playing a game that they don't even know is Web3 under the hood and experiencing 10 times the value. You know, my goal is in 5 or 10 years' time, when you play a game, if you don't have the right to sell an asset that you get, or if that company does rug pull you and change where frequency you can trade it at, it doesn't meet your expectation. You know, true player ownership shouldn't be this thing we have to advertise. It should be a native expectation of using digital goods on the internet, and that's the world we're trying to build toward.
Before I go to you, Ryan, how does Passport play into this in terms of the immediate term plans for y'all?
Yeah, look, I think the biggest thing is it's going to reduce by more than 10 times the customer acquisition cost for Web3 games. Like the drop-off for if you're building a game and you have to have people sign up to a MetaMask or sign up with a private key is like 95+%. It's ridiculous. How can anyone possibly compete on performance marketing, which is why we've seen such a heavy emphasis on viral word of mouth based marketing and referrals and these very highly monetizing but tiny audiences. But that's not the future. Like those audiences will always be incredibly important. Mobile is driven by whales, but it also requires a base where you're appealing to hundreds of millions of players. So I really think if you look at the uptake from people on Immutable today, like pretty much every game we've talked to is stoked to be rolling out Passport. It will work with every other major wallet in the ecosystem. So we're really thrilled with this.
Yeah, I like the user acquisition. I mean, a vast majority of games in Web3 are all on Polygon now. And I think this helps solidify all of that. And so I do think that will help with people that are deploying games, trying to get some early traction. You know, we have almost 300 million unique wallets on the protocol. So I do think this is really going to help. There's been a lot of like fragmentation within the ecosystem that makes it really hard for developers to kind of tap into. So this should be really helpful.
Final questions for y'all. Ryan, what do you want the folks in this room and anybody watching on the live stream to take away from this partnership and what y'all are doing here?
Yeah, look, we care very deeply about game developers. We really understand all sides of this perspective. I'm pretty empathetic with why we experience backlash and, a lot of where we've had shortcomings. The tech has been, pretty early in its infancy. I think now we're hitting, again, an inflection point where that's no longer the case. And so I'm really excited for us to, unveil to the world all of these different things that we're building across all these different verticals. And clearly gaming being one of the most important. I'm really excited now that we've got, the best gaming platform that's supporting Polygon and really helping the developers out. So it's a big moment for us as an industry, and I'm really excited for honestly everybody that's participating in it. Because I know it never is short of challenges in this space, both with like commentary as well as, bad actors that we've had to experience. And so I think we keep moving now in the right direction of weeding that stuff out, making the narrative much more easier to understand, making sure we're actually adding meaningful value for developers and users. And I feel like we've made tremendous progress. We have a lot of work to still do, but this is one big step moving in the right direction.
Robbie, how about you? What's the big takeaway?
Yeah, I agree. Look, for us, this is pretty simple. This is the end game. I think when we started in 2017, we started looking for what scaling infrastructure would support our requirements to have billions of gamers. And we investigated everything. We built prototypes of state channels, which never worked out. We looked at plasma chains. We looked at side chains, which never supported our security requirements. And it was pretty clear when ZK rollups came out that this would be the future of scaling and that would be on Ethereum. And for us, integrating Polygon ZK EVM, working with them on going to market, is really the unified stack that gives us the end game that allows us to say to game devs, hey, we're ready to go mainstream. Those $15 billion worth of gaming investments can now proceed with not having to worry about choice of vendor, choice of platform, choice of scaling protocol or wallets or cross-roll-up liquidity infrastructure, or even marketplaces because of our global order book. We're creating an incredibly simple one-stop shop where all they can worry about is building the best game possible. And the other thing I'll add in is we'll be raising the joint gaming fund for the Immutable Polygon ecosystem from today as well.
This is going to add a 9-figure fund for game developers. So we want to continue to make sure that we're investing in game developers. I think that's really important. So I know a lot of developers are figuring out if they're at a big studio or trying to think about what they want to do next. There's a lot of capital to go build your dreams. So please go do it. Now's the time.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Robbie. Rising tide lifts all boats. Really excited that y'all are doing this for gaming and for blockchain. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks, everyone.
Wow, so that was quite a bit to take in. So we're gonna have to do like definitely a recap of all that, what that means for IMX as a whole. You know, taking a look at their website, they're gonna have the fee utility, the IMX gas as well built into this. So the IMX token will be used as the core gas currency for Immutable ZK EVM, which will obviously be using Polygon's tech. So again, this is kind of a brand, like they're using Polygon, but they're going to brand it as, you know, Immutable X, obviously, for like as a client essentially. So kind of like how they use Starkware and StarkX already. So again, very interesting, but again, they're building their own solutions on their own platform. Probably allows them to scale up what they currently have and all the different other departments that they run, and allows them to scale them up in a much, I guess, more efficient way, is probably why they would do something like this. Definitely exciting news there. Pretty pumped. So anyways, the passport will be available in 1 month. And yeah, lots of exciting things on Immutable X here. So again, two juggernauts in the blockchain space coming together, working together to build for Web3 gamers. Very exciting news for Web3 gamers out there. So that's all I got for the stream. I will see you guys in the next video recap. Be sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell, and tune in for more next time. G Money, I see you. SoCal, what's going on, man? Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We got Shaq, some OGs in the house, Poor Man Printing. Shout out to Hello K as well. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Be like an NFT, be authentic, and I will catch you later. Peace.